Hi, everyone. Welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Peter Mills. Peter is the Executive Director of the Maine Turnpike Authority, a position he's held since 2011. He is a founding member of two economic development organizations and has written extensively on tax, education, and health policy. Peter ran twice for governor of Maine in the Republican primaries of 2006 and 2010. He served 16 years in the Maine state legislature and has practiced law in Portland and Skowhegan for more than 30 years. Peter is married to Superior Court Justice Nancy Mills, and Peter and his team hosted one of the most memorable maintenance conferences in 2015 in Portland. You folks were amazing, and we want to come back. Peter, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here. Spring is here, bright sun outside here in Maine.
All right, that's great. Well, this is Café IBTTA, where we drink coffee and talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. And a big shout out today to the American Society of Civil Engineers, which today is releasing its 2021 report card for America's infrastructure. You'll recall that Tom Smith, the executive director of ASCE, was our guest last November 25. So we salute you and wish you luck with that rollout. As always, we are taking your questions. Use the chat function and select all panelists and attendees. And we want to get started right away, and we want to hear from you. So please type a word or phrase that describes your feelings about the state of Maine, the easternmost state in the United States. Put that into the chat function right now. All right, we got a couple of lobsters here, Peter. Great team at Maine Turnpike, beautiful sailing, delicious lobsters, moose, trees, blueberries for Sal. I don't know who Sal is. Let's see, in-laws. Okay, we get love the water, world's best potatoes. Amazing. All right, well, we'll come back to that in a little while, Peter, but we want you to know that people are thinking fond thoughts about you and the state of Maine. And speaking of that, Peter, you were born and raised in Maine. You're Harvard educated. You're a veteran of the United States Navy and served in Vietnam. You've been in private law practice for a number of years. Tell us about Peter Mills, the man. How did you, what was your upbringing like, and how did you get to where you are today?
It's a long, tortured story, which I won't bother you with in detail. But one of the more interesting things I did practicing law was to defend design professionals, architects and engineers, in claims that were brought against them. So from an early age, I began to develop an understanding of the lingo associated with the design professions, and that has come in handy in the present job. I've been here this month is my 10th anniversary of managing the Maine Turnpike Authority, and it's been an extraordinary way of bringing together parts of my life, going back over 60 years, professional life, bringing them all together, and public service, politics, law, and a little bit of engineering, and a lot of the leadership lessons that I learned when I was in the Navy a long time ago.
Peter, tell us a little bit more about politics. Your sister is the governor of Maine, and you made a couple of runs at the governorship. Tell us about your activity in politics in Maine.
Well, I had wild ambitions to reform the Republican Party and make it into something other than what it has regrettably become recently. And I failed, but I came close in 2006 to being nominated for governor, and I think I would have won the general election. And then I tried again in 2010, and there were 7 of us in the race. I came in third, not a distant third, but there I was. And then I got a call. I was out in the woods cutting trees to clear out my ski trails up in Cornville, and my phone went off, and somebody said, "Would you like to get a suit on, come down here tomorrow and start running the Maine Turnpike?" And this is out of the blue. And my predecessor had resigned, and they needed somebody in a hurry. And I came down, and I've been here ever since. there was a lot to learn, but I've had great tutors who are still with me. I mean, we don't have very much turnover here, certainly in management. We're a very small road. We have, maybe 400 paychecks a week. And we still paying cash collectors to stand out there and collect money. And we have a maintenance staff of about 100. And it's a really fun road to manage. It's the only way to get in and out of the state. Our tolls are fairly low compared with what they are in other jurisdictions, but we're able to run the road on it.
Now, Peter, one of the things you've tried to do since you started there, when Governor LePage appointed you, is to be transparent, be really open to people. And in the early months, I understand your people or your staff put you on a TV show, an interview show, and something interesting happened after that. Talk to us about that.
Well, there were problems earlier there was a criticism that the organization wasn't quite as open or as transparent as it should be. And somebody put me, I was on the television I don't know, talking as an authority on something that I'd only just begun to do. And I said, look, I learn a lot from listening to the people that pay tolls. And I said, I really encourage you to call me and challenge me and ask questions about things that bother you about our road or how it's run. And I put my cell phone out there. I says, it's 207-858-6400. Easy to remember. Dial it up. I'm here. And then they ran it as a scroll on the bottom of the screen. And the interview was over at 8 o'clock. I started to walk out into the reception area of the studio, and this phone went off. I sat down. I left 3 hours later. But the great thing, I didn't get a lot of calls after that. The people, they called, and I had conversations with a dozen people probably, but I have put that phone number out over and over again in public settings, and I put it on my email and on literature, and maybe it's just Maine, but it isn't troublesome. And it has come in handy because people will call me about stuff. And I'll have to say sometimes, I had no idea. And I'm so glad you called. And I got down and look into it. And sure enough, something's going wrong. And I never would have found out about it if I hadn't, had that phone open.
Right. Peter, you talked earlier about how there were great people in the organization. There were great people who were there when you arrived. And you mentioned to me in an earlier conversation that your Navy experience really prepared you well for this role. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it was handy to have had it. I mean, I was in the service. I was an officer in the Navy on destroyers, small ships, but the beauty of being on a destroyer is that if you're an officer, even a junior officer, they give you tremendous responsibility, and you need to, and you get to drive the ship all the time, which was my favorite job of all time, by the way. And I got out of the Navy when I was 27. And so here I was 67 taking over this job. And I look back and I thought, my God, I need to remember a lot of that stuff that my commanding officers taught me. And it came back. It's remarkable. And it was probably, the naval experience was probably the single most valuable component of my background that prepared me for this work. Representing architects and engineers was helpful, and being in politics was helpful because you're not afraid to deal with the public, which is really important in this job. It's a very, very public highway. Everybody uses it. Everybody resents paying for it. And so you really have to be prepared to be open with people and satisfy their concerns.
Our guest today is Peter Mills. He's the Executive Director of the Maine Turnpike Authority. We are taking your questions. Please open the chat function and set it to all panelists and attendees. And Peter, here's a question from Russ Wicks. He says, what takeaways have you learned from your experience with dealing with the public over the matter of the replacement of the York Toll Plaza?
Yeah, we made it, that's a huge, long story, but we had a local group, a small group of people, relatively small, in one town that was hostile to the idea that we would rebuild this toll plaza is the entrance to Maine. I mean, it's where it's the largest, it's the area where everybody has to go through to come in and go out and pay for the privilege. And the old plaza had been built in 1979 on soils. It was built on 60 feet of blue clay, and the adjoining highway had sunk 7 or 8 feet adjacent to it. And we had built it up, and we just had to get rid of it. It was completely obsolete. And we wanted to build a really nice toll plaza to welcome people into the state of Maine. And they said, well, you don't need to do that. You don't need to collect cash anymore. Nobody's collecting cash. Get with it. Join the 20th century. Write down their plates from the photographs and go send them a bill. Well, we would be sending bills to all 50 states, Mexico, and 10 provinces, because Maine is vacation land. And we said, we deeply appreciate the courage of those states that have been abandoning cash, but we're not ready there. We're not ready yet. And we're going to build cash plazas. And that was what the hostility was always. You don't need to build one of those great big things. You can put gantries up like they're doing, or they will do at that time in Massachusetts, and get rid of cash collection. And we actually, our environmental permit was hanging on that very question. And we won. We said, look, our business plan is to continue collecting cash. We do need to. And the regulatory agencies agreed with us and said, that's a business decision. Go ahead. And they gave us our permits. But and I used to show up at the meetings of the opponents. That was they would have meetings at a restaurant down on Route 1. And I would hear about when they were going to be. And I'd walk in, and it would be 7 o'clock in the evening, and they would be talking, oh, here's Mills. And then they would talk to me. And some of it was, they were challenging. And then about 8 o'clock, after about an hour, I'd say, okay, is it time for me to leave now? Because they would, I knew they wanted to talk and scheme against us.
I bet your appearance there took out some of the venom in the conversation. It was like, if this guy is willing to show up, he must care about what we're thinking about.
It became a civil disagreement and stayed civil throughout.
Right.
And they all had my cell phone number.
Right.
And they called me now and then, and it was fun. And, I said, let's agree to disagree. And then they tried to persuade me otherwise. And they had don't get me wrong, their challenge was valid. It was not valid in the long run, but the question was a valid one to ask. Let me put it that way. And we agreed with them that the question should be asked.
Yep.
And then we studied it very carefully, and we were persuaded that our road, of all roads in the United States, should probably be very slow about abandoning cash because of the nature of the traffic.
Peter, I want to do a little show and tell. We're going to put up a couple of slides here of photographs when IBTTA has been in Maine. And this first set is when we had our maintenance workshop in Maine in 2015. I see your colleague, Peter Murfeld, up there, and you speaking with Ed Regan. That was a great event. And then here's another set from 2019, when you and I both testified right there at your headquarters before the Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of highway funding in the state of Maine. And very interesting day. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about the result of that Blue Ribbon Commission and the future of highway funding and finance in Maine.
Yeah, it's the same story here as it is in so many other jurisdictions. There's tremendous reluctance to think about raising the gas tax. And so you have situations where what the history of the Maine Turnpike is that we have more and more over the years taken on mobility challenges, let's put it that way, broadly speaking, that the DOT has little capacity to address. And we're doing studies right now for highway expansions that they would not be able to do, but that we have the capacity to do. And at some point, I would hope that at the national level, somebody will take that 18-cent gas tax and jack it up to where it belongs, and then distribute the money. Let the states off the hook, the political hook of having to ruminate over whether and debate over whether to raise the gas tax. Let's let the feds begin supporting these highway systems. And the interstate system was built, what, in 1955 to roughly 1975 or 80. And those bridges, they need
help.
They need to be rebuilt. And
Right.
and they don't want to let us toll it yet. They'll probably come around someday to saying, okay, put your gantries up and fix these bridges for us.
Well, your neighbor to the south, Rhode Island, has figured out to take advantage of that the bridge exception to
That's
allow
correct.
tolling of bridges on the interstate highway. So maybe we'll see some more of that in the years.
Connecticut has got permission to do more than they are allowing themselves to do, but the nation has got to come to grips with this, because this infrastructure doesn't repair itself.
And this points to what the American Society of Civil Engineers is doing today, releasing that report. And
Yeah.
I know Peter Murfeld worked on the Maine report, and they're going to come out with a letter grade for overall infrastructure and roads and transit. And we know it's not going to be an A or a B plus. It's going to be somewhere lower than that. I don't want to steal their thunder, but yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, don't we?
Yeah, roads and highways are the two categories and they're bad. It's pretty low everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be pretty critical of the electrical transmission infrastructure. This one.
Yeah. Peter, everybody has a COVID-19 experience. So many alterations in how businesses are done, especially even toll facilities. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how the Maine Turnpike performed during COVID-19, which is still going on.
Yeah, we sent everybody home for 6 weeks at the very beginning, because and other businesses did the same. We were all very nervous about it, and we kept our toll collectors on the job and gave them gloves and masks, and they were outdoors, essentially outdoors. They're in a booth. We had it evaluated and found that most of the doctors were saying, no, it's okay. It's a reasonably safe environment. And the interface with a customer to collect $1 or $3 is so instantaneous that it really doesn't lend itself to transmission. And we were satisfied with that decision. And we paid the people that did come into work, we paid them by the hour on top of their salaries that they were being paid to stay home. It set a tone. Anyway, that 6-week period set a tone with our labor force. Was extraordinarily grateful, because their kids were out of school. I mean, everybody had a reason to stay home. And we've brought almost everybody back now, and we've got intermittent arrangements with some of them, hybrid arrangements, which they work at home some of the time and some not. But it worked out well. But the biggest challenge was just at this time last year, 12 months ago, we had a load of capital work in progress on the road. And in Maine, you only work, this is the time of year you start working again.
Right.
And the question was, are those crews coming back? And we said, you're all invited, because there's no traffic. You can work daytimes now.
Yeah.
And it was in some sense a great opportunity but on the other hand, were they going to come? And then we had to sign a big widening contract. We wanted to add 2 lanes around Portland. And it was a $28 million contract. We got the low bidder in here, and he says, I don't want to sign it. He says, I don't know if my crew is coming in. And we waited, and we had him sign it anyway, and then immediately gave him a change order to give him another year to do the job. That's how we resolved it. No price change. Just if you need time, we're going to give you time, because time is, in this setting, this time is cheap. And everybody stayed at work. It worked out great. We spent $106 million on capital projects in 2020, which is a lot for our little road. And we had a big role to play in keeping the Southern Maine economy rolling, because all the bars were closed, the restaurants, the hotels, everything else was down. What I don't understand is, why don't bartenders go out and get a CDL license? We can't get enough truck drivers. If I were around looking for work, I'd take the course. Even at my age, I'd like to go get the CDL.
So speaking of truck drivers, you mentioned how traffic was down from the beginning of the pandemic, but freight was stayed strong, right?
Our revenue stayed. We lost $40 million last year out of 100, and we were expecting 150 something, and we dropped by about 40, and it was almost all car traffic. I couldn't believe Manhattan, when they had the big, remember their hospitals were overflowing and everything else. Everybody in Manhattan wanted Poland spring water from Maine. The biggest biggest water bottling plant in the world is in Hollis, Maine, with an access to the turnpike in the city of Saco. Those trucks were rolling during COVID, and incoming freight. People were home ordering stuff. So truck traffic kept us going. We were down by 30% or so, but it wasn't because of trucks. The trucks sustained us through it, and they still are, still rolling.
Peter, here's another question from one of our viewers, and a perennial question having to do with public acceptance. You said earlier in your remarks, everyone resents the toll road, or they resent paying for the toll road. What are your top 3 ways to gain public acceptance from politicians, business, and the public?
Well, from the politicians, it's relatively easy. You say, "Oh, do you want this road? Go ahead. See if you can raise a gas tax high enough to take care of this road the way we do." And they answer, then they back right away. With the public, and we get this in Maine, service is a huge issue because in the winter, even if you're an experienced driver, and I count myself as one of those, you get out there on the road with this 4 or 5 or 6 inches of wet snow on the ground. There's no safe way to navigate that. And on the turnpike you can, because our plow routes are short. We have 85 plow trucks. When we have those 3-lane sections, we have three trucks running along in tandem, and they come by every 30 minutes or so. I mean, that road is clean, and people truly appreciate, and they say, any number of people have said, "Oh, we will gladly pay for that service."
Yeah. So for the politicians, it's what's the alternative? You're not going to increase the gas tax. You need this road.
Right.
Funded and financed the way it is. And for the public, the big message is service. You are going to drive on a well-maintained, safe, snow-cleared highway.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And it isn't even, I mean, even in the summer, I get kudos by email and by personal notes from people who say, "One of your maintenance people stopped and changed my tire, or help me go get a battery replaced." I mean, we just do that for people. We're out there and we just do it.
So Peter, COVID-19 has accelerated the transition to ETC and alternatives to cash collection. Tell us about your attitude toward that, about move to alternative means of collecting.
Yeah, we are deeply concerned about it. We will be right up front and center at your your next meeting. There's a lot of stuff out there on phone apps, on PayGo, Paytolo. There are a lot of ways of doing this. We are deeply reluctant to allow somebody to become a customer just by driving under one of our gantries. It's hard to bring ourselves to do that. Right now, they're a violator.
Right. If they don't have a easy pass, right.
Yeah, because what they did is they took the wrong lane. In our road, we've got 19 cash places. Right now we do anyway, and we want you to go there. And yes, it's expensive to maintain those, but at least it's a solution. We say, "Sorry, you went through the wrong lane. You're a violator, and we're not going to." The first time through, second, we don't. The penalties are minor, but but if we suddenly have, I mean, like we talk to Massachusetts a lot. They've got something like 2 million Easy Pass customers. They've got, I think, over 3 million toll by plate customers they've created through their electronic systems. And God bless them. And they had to, because of their real estate constraints and a lot of other things. We talk with them all the time, and we indeed collect a lot of their tolls for them when they send them up here through reciprocity. We're one of the few states that has a reciprocity arrangement. But we don't internally, I don't have a clear concept of what we're going to do. We're looking forward to sticker tags. We're hoping that the IAG will all join hands, all 38 of us or whatever, and convert to sticker tags sometime around December of 22 or January of 23. That doesn't solve the problem, though, about how do you substitute for, it makes it easier for people to join the Easy Pass Club, certainly cheaper and easier. But we're having a lot of internal discussion, and we're looking forward to listening to the experts that you folks bring forward on what is the latest thing about how you replace, cash. Or one thing is reasonably certain here at the Turnpike: we will probably not have a vendor do it for it. We have 35 people down in customer service. We put no time constraints on them. If they have to give marital advice over the phone for half an hour, they have permission from us to do it. And we have a close relationship to our customers, and we like to maintain it that way. It saves a lot of hassles. And so we probably are not going to farm it out to an out-of-state vendor. We're probably going to continue doing it. The question is in what mode?
Right.
Serious
right.
question.
You place a big premium on safety for your customers and also your employees. WCYY last week published a big story about the tunnels underneath the turnpike. Tell us a little bit about that project that's been going on.
Well, the tunnels, we have tunnels wherever it's necessary for our toll collectors to cross from a building where they eat lunch and stuff to the toll booth. We don't want them crossing in traffic, so they take the tunnel. But the tunnels have been extremely, even these new tunnels we've been building, they're a beautiful place to put equipment. Our electronics are well sheltered in a space that's well lit, that's dry, that is away from vandalism. And the tunnels serve several purposes, not just to allow people, it also is a conduit for bringing heat into the toll booths on the other side of the road and other things. But they are, we have found them you either have to build a structure somewhere to house your electronics, or you put it in your tunnel. And so we build the tunnels accordingly. And it's a nice, quiet place for people to work, no traffic. There are no adverse weather conditions. The tunnels have been a good investment for us, even for the new plazas that we've been building, in anticipation that someday we will not have people walking through them to go to a toll booth. That day is coming, without any question.
Yep. Peter, you're doing something interesting with some of the neighboring communities that adjoin the turnpike about their traffic signals, equipment that's off the turnpike. Talk to us about that.
Well, one of the ways that we tell the politicians that we're a value act is we have seen situations where towns or the state in some cases are in charge of maintaining traffic signals that are near the ramps that we have, or they are the places that the cars go and right after they leave the turnpike. And we have seen so many situations where traffic backs up at 4:30 in the afternoon, and all of a sudden we realize that our main line is jammed. And when you start screwing around with our main line, that's our religion. That main line is going to stay open. And when we see commuter traffic day after day backing up on our, and we say to ourselves, well, do we have to build another exit lane? No, we got to fix the lights. So the signals. We got a deal for you, small town. Let us run it for you, please. And they say, and we'll not only run that one, we'll run the next 3 or 4 downstream so that traffic is organized and gets home. And and you don't have to tell anybody. You can claim all the credit for having fixed it if you want to, but let us do it, because I've got several people working here who are top notch at doing that sort of thing. We run 19 signal in 7 different towns up and down the road that are adjacent to our road. And we are happy to do it because it saves us from having to worry about, jamming up the main line.
Peter, you put your finger on a great principle that you can get a lot of good work done if you don't worry about who takes credit for it, right?
Yeah.
If you let everybody take credit, a lot of good stuff gets done. Peter, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to come back to you for some final words of wisdom. So Don't forget to complete the survey that you'll receive at the end of today's program. Next week, our guest on Café IBTTA is Bill Halkias, Managing Director and CEO of the Attica Tollway in Athens, Greece.
Wow.
IBTTA's book club discussion will meet on March 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. The book, Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. In this groundbreaking history of the modern American metropolis, Richard Rothstein, a leading authority on housing policy, explodes the myth that America's cities came to be racially divided through de facto segregation, that is, through individual prejudices, income differences, or the actions of private institutions like banks and real estate agencies. Rather, the color of law makes clear that it was de jure segregation, the laws and policy decisions passed by local, state, and federal governments that actually promoted the discriminatory practices that continue to this day. This book discussion is sponsored by IBTTA's Task Force on Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion. You can learn more about the task force, the book group, and all our events by visiting the IBTTA website. And as you can see from the slide coming up, we have a bunch of really interesting events coming up in March. Again, go to the IBTTA website for full details. And once again, don't forget to complete the survey that you'll receive at the end of today's program. Well, Peter, what final words of wisdom do you have before we sign off today?
I just wanted to say I've been 10 years here and it's the greatest job I've ever had because every day is different. You have to know everything about what's going on the road. That includes bond financing, it includes accounting, personnel, engineering, plow truck driving. I mean, it's a complete alphabet soup of challenges. And I love that. I haven't had a job like this since I was in the Navy and had to know everything about the ship I was on. But this is that kind of a job. And I've come to worship other people that are on this call who have the same, who I think enjoy the same set of challenges. It's really refreshing.
Peter, it's been a pleasure having you on the program, and congratulations on your 10-year anniversary. And to all the IBTTA members, be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, everybody.